Hannah Oli Pop Rock Radio. Estás escuchando Jamie Roxx de Pop Rock Radio. Manténganse al tanto.
Hej, det här är Hits från Sverige och vi lyssnar till Pop Rock Radio med Jamie Roxx.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is the Pop Roxx Radio Talk Show. I'm your host, pop art painter Jamie Roxx, and this is the big show. You found it. I'm glad you did, as are our advertisers. Remember to support them, and if you do, they usually these days have a little space. How'd you hear about us? Just type in Roxx, ROXX or whatever. And for us small business owners, engagement tracking is what they call it, is very nice because that shows which checks we need to keep sending people. So, where to spend our money and whatnot as far as, what's working and what's not. Anyhow, today we're doing something a little different. I like to have a diverse people of all backgrounds and whatnot and interests on the show, just because I think it makes it interesting. And as you longtime viewers and listeners to the show know, about once a month, I try to have somebody from the paranormal world. Well, we're not talking UFOs this time. We're talking something much more close. They kind of look like aliens, I guess. They got big eyes and stuff. But we're talking about the Fae. And we have an expert all the way from the UK. And they're various, because when you say Fae, we're not talking about Steve, who I went to high school with. He's doing well, ladies and gentlemen. He is very Fae, but we love him for it. No, we're talking about little people and gnomes and fairies and the like. Sprites, if you will. Pixies. There's a whole bunch of them. There's a whole world of them. But anyway, we have, and the weird thing is, well, you know what? We'll get into that here in a minute because I want to talk to the expert about it. But I want to introduce her. Her name is Kate. Kate, here in the Hawthorne Ray. Kate, how are you? How are things in the evening in the UK?
It's warmed up a little bit here. We're not in sub-zero temperatures anymore, so we're just getting out of that. I think we're going to go back into bleak midwinter by the end of next week. But we're above minus degrees, so Brits are happy at the minute.
Absolutely. Well, it's a break from rain, snow,
yeah.
But I grew up in Detroit and went to college in Boston and stuff, so I'm used to. And then after college, I said, I need to live places where there's no snow. And it was really digging out your car was my big complaint about, and drivers. I was pretty good driving in the snow, but other people weren't. So yeah, it's a drag. It's a drag. But at least you have seasons, you know what I mean? You were telling me about your 2 weeks of summer you guys get, which is nice.
We're very lucky. We're very lucky to see the sun for that 2 weeks, about June, July time. It occasionally pops out at other periods of time, but as a whole, we don't get a summer. It's what people's views are of the UK and the weather are absolutely right. So if you haven't been to the UK and you hear it rains and it's miserable, then it's pretty spot on.
That kind of probably explains a lot of British history, of colonialism and India. Let's go by boat there. It's not
Let's
raining.
Get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need sunshine.
That's funny. That is funny. So that's cool. That is cool. So let me ask you. You are such an interesting person, and I love. And this is how I did it on the web flyer and whatnot. On your Facebook page, it lists what you do. And well, there's two things that struck me at first. It says works at accidental author. I have to know what was the accident. What's the story behind that? But you also not only are an author, you're a researcher, a speaker, teacher, writer, YouTuber. And you just told me, we were talking before the show, former art teacher. How cool is that? 5 points to House Hawthorne, or Hair in the Hawthorne. I like that. How did all this stuff happen? When you were a young lass, were just all over the place and said, I'm going to study everything?
No, not really. I think it all kind of churned up later on in life. It's all elements of things that I've been highly interested in over the years. But it seemed to accumulate around. I had a certain birthday, a certain big birthday, a milestone. I was wondering how to put a marker on that birthday. I couldn't remember my 16th very well. I couldn't remember my 21st. I've not done anything for that. I'm not going to go any further to give you a clue of what
No, no,
birthday
no,
that
no.
was, but
Of course.
it was a big birthday. And I was chatting with my brother and I said, what do people do? I don't want a party. I don't want a big fanfare. And so we discussed things like bungee jumping, which doesn't appeal to me, or jumping out of a plane. And he said, well, what really frightens you? And I said, koi carp fish. And the thought of swimming with koi carp was something that I was not going to do. And so he said, well, what else? And the thing at that time that absolutely petrified me was poltergeist activity.
Oh.
So it was dark ghostly encounters, and it petrified me. And he said, well, why don't you do it? And this rolled on, and I put this idea out into the universe, and the universe went, okay, then here you go. And within 6 months, I was a paranormal investigator. I then moved on within 8 months to a huge events company, and my boss of that events company is well known on British TV. And it snowballed and snowballed and snowballed and kind of went off on its own different strands. And I was quite happy to go, yeah, to everything, just bring it on. And the more I kind of let it just flow, the more it just came to me. It was genius.
That's amazing. Well, that goes to show what a lesson in for folks. Certainly not a boring existence, I mean, and I'm not saying everybody should become a ghost hunter. I'm saying face your fear, maybe, and see
Yeah.
where that leads. The path to that. That's amazing. As far as ghosts go, in our family, my wife, she, she has a job, but she also has a side business where she sells crystals and metaphysical stuff, and they do little markets,
Mhm.
and she loves it. She loves that community she's part of, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. I've always been a little more of the skeptic in our family, which is on most things. On most things, I remember a couple years ago, I get up really early. Just I'm an old man, and I got up and I walked out of the bedroom towards the washroom, and I saw a ghost in our house. Freaked me out.
Wow.
Freaked me out. I screamed like a little girl. Woke my wife up. She's like, do I need to get you some drawers made of silk? What's going on there, Tina? What's happening? I'm like, oh no, I just. And then she looked and she goes, we had, because she's healthy, and and that she's a woman, she's into this stuff. We had got this big water churn filter that goes through 18 layers of filtration, and so because I just drink water out of the sink. I never even thought about it, but apparently this is better for it. So that was new in my line of sight to the kitchen, and in my mind I thought it was something that it wasn't, and that freaked me out. So that was the extent of my ghost sighting that I'm aware of. And then she, we were kind of talking about it afterwards, and she said, though, she goes, the human mind is kind of strange. You actually may have seen something that was terrifying to you, and your mind just erased that part. It was too much for you to deal with. And that's a lovely thought, dear. Thanks for putting that in my head now. But yeah, no, I am old enough. I'm an old man now, Kate, and I'm old enough to know that I don't know everything. I'm
Hmm.
saying I'm a skeptic. There has been time and time again in my life where I was pretty sure of something, and then it turned out not to be the case. So now
Yeah.
I'm at a point where I'm going, I don't judge anybody because or any situation just out of hand, because I know I'm not right about everything. You know what I mean? And everybody has different experiences in life. It's interesting about the Fae. I was so excited for you to come on and talk. It's one of the things in folklore, they kind of show up in every culture, some version of
Yeah.
that, and I'm Native American, tribe I'm in is Cherokee, and my grandmother put out food nightly for their version, the Cherokee version. They're little people. They don't have wings or anything, but if you're a bad person and you mess with them or other people, well, they'll mess with you. You know what I mean? If you're good,
Mhm.
maybe they throw a little luck your way or something. You know what I mean? I don't know if luck's the right word, but you know what I'm saying. But it's interesting that that would show up in the specifics of diminutive creatures, people, and I think that's fascinating. No, everybody just came up with this myth at the same time. That seems a little far fetched to me. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, to say that they, like you say, it's global, and they've even found in isolated tribes around the world that they do have something very, very similar. They will have spirits in the woods, or they'll have ancestors who come to them, and they're small. So there's lots of references globally. To me, the word fairy is kind of an umbrella.
Mm.
It's a branching umbrella. And I kind of sway in between whether the cryptozoology stuff kind of filters into that or not. I know definitely there's the, obvious connections with aliens and UFOs. But you were saying earlier about, winged creatures, and winged creatures are something that's very much a turn of the sort of 1900s
Oh,
that
okay.
came into play. Prior to that, there is very little, if any, references to
Yeah.
these beings having wings, but it's filtered into our unconsciousness through things like Disney films and, the absinthe fairy on the absinthe bottle, and it became very much a symbol of the fairies, which unfortunately made taking the subject seriously very hard. For a lot of people, they couldn't get their head round, looking at it in the same perspective as we look at paranormal ghosts, or we look at the cryptids or UFOs. It's kind of, I was speaking yesterday, it's literally the last taboo in the supernatural world to talk about fairies in the same reverence that we talk about other paranormal subjects. It's changing, which is great, but I do blame the wings. I blame Tinkerbell for
Yeah.
that one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a painter, I'll finish a painting, and in our house, and this isn't weird or anything. I think this is probably typical in a lot of homes. I'll finish a painting, and it's not finished when I say it's finished. I got to get the wife in. If she's not around, or she's out of town on a trip with her girlfriends or something, well, my dog, has given me the nod of approval many times that it's done. Because as a painter, I'm like, oh, I need to work on this. I know, let's add this. Let's take that out. Let's, and I'll never get anything done. But I was reading somewhere. No, I don't know how true this is, but and this was years ago. I was reading about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and apparently, when he would finish a Sherlock Holmes serial for, they would release them, I guess, through the paper or some little penny dreadfuls or something. Anyway, some cool British Victorian thing that he, going, but he got paid, so whatever. But apparently, he had some fairies that would visit him, and he would tell them what he wrote, and they would say, "Send it off," or rework that part, And again, I wasn't there, of course. I don't know how true that is or whatnot. As a creative person, I get where that would come from, because I do that every day, not with fairies, but just I haven't been lucky enough for any of them to show up. you know,
Maybe they have shown up, and maybe you haven't asked them.
that's very We did have a bunch of shoes suddenly get made one night, but the cobbler lives next door. No, I'm
There you go.
kidding. I'm kidding, folks. It's a terrible joke. Oh, we got to cut that out. Terrible, terrible. That's
I
another
mean,
thing my wife does is tell me
I'm just
my jokes are bad. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
cut you
no.
off.
I'm loving the jokes. I don't know whether I'm sure you are aware of the artwork of Brian Froud. Him and his wife worked on Labyrinth Dark Crystal. I had a wonderful opportunity to spend a couple of weekends over a couple of years at home with them, so going to their
Who's
house.
that?
And I chatted to Brian specifically about what happens during his art process. And he said that there's two things that occur. He will either go out into the natural landscape and take almost the elementals come in. So a rock formation will start forming, whether it's pareidolia or whatever, into a being that he'll draw or sketch. And the same with mounds of earth but he said that the other thing, this is really interesting, he would go home and be touching up on his paintings or finishing bits off. And he said that he quite often gets hounded. So these fairies will turn up into his art studio. They want to be painted. So he has to include them in his paintings
I
or
love
they
it.
wreak havoc around the house. They will steal things, they will move things. So yeah, you have to be wary of the fairies especially if you're a creative, they are going to be about.
I'm telling you, even to this day, as I say, I'm a skeptic and whatnot. My wife was making something the other day, and there were leftovers of it, and this shouldn't surprise her because this happens all the time. She goes, well, let me put these in the we have a thing in our freezer. We put scraps for the compost. And I said, hold on. I said, that's good stuff. She goes, oh, you want some more? And I said, no, no. We put it out for the little people. They'll eat that. And they'll like that. And we were getting ready we got a new roof put on our house. And I said, trust me, we need all the help we can get. Because when they take the old roof off, you don't know what else they're going to find that we didn't plan on. This could turn way more expensive than it already is. And you looked at me, she was like, you're serious? I said, absolutely serious. And I did. And she was like, oh, weird Indian stuff, but what's he doing? And the next morning she got up and she went out to get the thing that I had the food in. And she goes, all the food's gone. Now, I know logically there's probably a very happy possum or raccoon or something. But you know what? Why not hedge the bet a little bit is all I'm saying. And they didn't find too much when they did the roof. And so I don't know if that
There
helps.
you go.
I will take whatever, happily.
Yeah.
That's cool though.
I think
That's cool. No, have
it was
you
quite,
had personal experiences that you're comfortable if I
yeah.
let's just say we should have said this off camera. If I broach a topic that just say move on, Jamie, and no problem, we'll cut it out, nobody will ever know about it. Just like
No,
this.
I'm good. I'm good with it.
Okay.
Honestly. Yeah.
Have you had personal experiences where you've seen things and that maybe couldn't be explained out of hand?
I've had multiple experiences, and interestingly, I'm one of the things that I want to do at the minute is there's new research coming out, and it's coming out of America about the neurological makeup of people who have continuing or multiple experiences of the supernatural. And I was listening to a guy surmising papers that were out there and saying that it's something to do with the firing of the brain at a certain place in the brain, that it's wired differently into those people who have experiences. And what they're saying is they're looking into whether that's because they are interfacing in a different way, or whether it is the brain putting those things out to come back. I think it's absolutely fascinating either way, But yeah,
Absolutely.
experiences, ghosts, poltergeists, the whole shebang of that, and some really, really terrifying ones. In terms of fairies, one of the ones that I didn't talk about for 20 years because I was terrified about how people were going to receive it.
Right, right.
I was in a place of a very ancient landscape within Britain, um, and there was an old burial mound, sort of Neolithic burial ground.
Wow.
Um,
Were
that I
there a
was walking.
bunch of stones standing around?
Yeah,
Like, okay.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
you've got you've got an opening that you go into, and people were interned into different sections, and people who were high in the community were interned into those.
Hey, you're not
And
supposed
I
to
was
go into
walk.
those places. Haven't you've read the
This was
Lord of the
this was.
Rings? You're not supposed. Bad things are in there. Wake up in
No,
a.
I mean, Luckily, I have a real good sense of it's called Wayland Smithy. So if anybody comes over to the UK, it's definitely worth a visit. And I've got a real nice sense of Wayland Smithy. But walking down, imagine it was a very rare sunny day. It was one of our rare summer days. And there is either side of foliage and then old ancient hedges on top of them. And my friends were walking ahead, and I was hearing like an almost humming, singing, whistling sound. That's the only way I can describe it. It was very high pitched, and it was coming from all over the vegetation at the bottom of the hedges. And I heard things scurrying about, and I tried a few times to sort of part the vegetation to see what was there. And I eventually sort of rugby tackled the ground, parted the grass, and there was this thing. It was about the size of my fist, and I remember looking at it, and it was on all fours, but it was looking over its shoulder at me. And I looked at it, and I thought, "What on earth's that?" And it looked at me as if to go, "Oh shit." And the presiding thought after that was, it's got tweed trousers on and little braces. So it was kind
It's
of the
not a
shape of a
hedgehog.
toad. Sorry?
It's not a hedgehog or something. It's
No.
got clothes.
It had clothes on, but it was the shape of a toad. But it had the head like very mouse-like features. And it squealed quite. I mean, it was physical. I could have picked this thing up. It wasn't etherical. It wasn't made of light, or you couldn't see through it. It wasn't vibrating. Literally, I could have handled it.
Oh,
It saw me. It squealed like a really high-pitched squeal, and I sort of went, "Ugh," and jumped back, and then it shot off into the undergrowth. Now, I was with friends. There were three lads who were a little bit older than me. So I jogged on towards them, who were further down the path, and I said, "Did you hear the noise? Have you heard this humming, whistling sound?" And they hadn't. So I said, "I think I've seen a gnome," because this is what I thought at the time it might be. And I never lived it down. For the rest of the day, they absolutely took the Michael out of me. They were mocking me and, jibing
crazy.
me about it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you're a girl, and
yeah.
all that
So
kind of.
I didn't talk about it. And then when I did open up later on, the person who I told was very, very good about the situation and didn't think I was crazy. So that kind of put me at ease a bit. And then I started hearing tales of other people having these encounters with things that you really couldn't explain. So
Interesting.
that was in my teens. That happened in my teens.
That's and unfortunately that happens a lot. I know in the UFO, what do they call them now, UAPs? They're trying to rebrand. Somebody's been on TikTok too much. Anyway, for years people have been seeing stuff, but they don't want to report it. They don't, they don't want the ridicule. And
Yeah,
you know, something growing up, I was a goth kid. We used to call them punkers. I was one of those kids, and everybody, all my friends that were as well, usually were like, well, if people are going to make fun of me, they're going to make fun of me on my terms. So they ran with that, because people, I think, in general, mock what they don't get, they don't understand. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's, I don't think that's an example of insightfulness. I think it's an example of ignorance almost. Oh, I'm afraid of something, I don't understand it. The best way to deal with this is to make fun of not only that, but who's ever doing that or saw that or experienced that. And I think, we don't know everything. We don't know. You see it all the time. I'm sure everybody watching or listening to this has had that experience where something's happened in your life, and I'm not saying you saw a gnome or anything. Maybe you were lucky. I think that's lucky. I would love to have that experience. The thing is you've had something happen in your life and you're like, I couldn't have planned that. I couldn't have planned that better.
Yeah.
It just, everything fell into place. And it was so weird that all these things happened to cause this particular thing. And I'm not saying that's just chance that happens, maybe, I mean, maybe you're sending out a signal or something and the universe is sending something back or whatever. Whatever you want to call it, cause and effect is a pretty constant in the universe. You know what I mean? I'm very, very, that's cool. I'm impressed that you had that experience. I feel bad that you had the experience of your friend's reaction to it. But you can't get mad at people for being people usually, but you just, well, who's laughing now? They're working in an office
Exactly.
somewhere selling insurance, and you're, you know, hanging out with cool artists and going ghost hunting and stuff. I mean, you won. You know what I mean?
I know, and I think that their reaction has definitely been something that has, in recent years, spurred me on for investigating it deeper, for talking to other people about their experiences. So, actually, I'm quite grateful that they weren't accepting of it because I think it might have just faded into the midst of time for me and not be because they were quite cruel actually they
Mm.
weren't nice at all about it and so that stuck with me and the image of the day and how it unfolded has definitely it's definitely crystal clear and embedded because of their reaction. So I am eternally grateful that that's how it played out, and it's not until now, because I speak about it as part of my personal fairy journey, but also as a signal to other people that there are people you can talk to. You know, you're
Absolutely.
not alone. You're not going crazy. You know, people have all kinds of weird experiences, and there are people who are accepting of talking about that.
Amazing. Amazing. Hey, before I forget, I was just looking at the poster behind you, and we had talked a little bit about that. I don't know the story of the hare and the hawthorn. I gotta know.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Because
So
that's a cool tagline, baby. That's awesome. People make movies with
so
that tagline.
So, Hare in the Hawthorn evolved. Hare in the Hawthorn is my umbrella creative title, if you like. So, any artwork, any craft work, any podcasting, all the creative stuff that I do comes under Hare in the Hawthorn. Now, the hare, and I'm sure people who are listening to this absolutely know this, so I apologise for that. But the hare is a symbol of being in the two worlds. So, a hare will traverse this world and
Really?
traverse the other world. Yeah. So, they are very good. They're often witches' familiars as well. The
I did not
Hawthorne
know
Park.
that.
Did you not?
American? No, no. I'd heard that about cats, kind of, and you know what I mean, or in two places, but no, I didn't know that about hair. I
Yeah.
respect
They
hares a lot more now.
beautiful creatures, absolutely wonderful. And the hawthorn bit here in England, we have folklore around the hawthorn is sacred to the fairies, but it also creates a portal to other realms. So if you walk through two boughs of hawthorn, do you call it hawthorn over in
I don't
America?
know.
Is it
I
hawthorn?
didn't want to sound silly or simple, but because I'm sitting here thinking, as you're saying this, I'm going, hey, was the hedges where she heard the hum? Was that kind of a hawthorny type deal maybe happening there?
Yes, definitely. Our hedgerows are, and our ancient hedgerows are predominantly hawthorn because they're spiky and they keep animals out from going into farmers' fields. But an arch of them creates a doorway that have set, I mean, especially in Ireland, people are so superstitious about not walking through those archways unless they want to seek out the fairies, which the Irish people generally don't want to do because they have a very long relationship with a not so great relationship with the fairy folk. So, but the hair bit you were asking about, my middle tag on my it's kind of my middle name tag on Instagram and on Facebook is HareGirl. And that comes from the weekend that I spent with Brian and Wendy Froud. So I was creating a hair as part of a workshop with them. And Wendy, bless her, kept forgetting my name.
Mm.
So she dubbed me Hair Girl. she's American, so you can imagine. Well, I'm not going to embarrass myself
Right.
by doing an American accent, but for the entire weekend, that's how she called me. So I took it as kind of like a fairy name. I felt very much that she's the queen of the fairies. She's given me this name. So yeah, I do treasure that. It's a bit corny, but I do treasure
No, it's
that
cool.
nickname.
It's cool. What a story too. What a story. It's so interesting. I I have so many questions. It's just I should have wrote an outline. I should have. The teacher in you is like, Jamie, you're so unprepared. Usually I have bands on and stuff. And, oh, tell me about your latest single. Oh, that's cool. But no, this is very, very interesting. Yeah, Hawthorns. My wife is going to watch this, and we have this giant backyard. It's mostly Native American themed, and we have a giant vegetable garden, and that's my side. And then she has, I did a wildflower butterfly side for her, and she got all her witch stuff over there and whatnot. And she's
I
going to
like
watch
your
this.
wife already.
Oh, I'm telling you, yeah, you two peas in a pod. She's going to watch this, and I know the first question: can you grow hawthorn? Because we need an arch and that side of the and I'm like, I know this is gonna. Things are hard to grow. It's a subtropical climate. It's
Yeah.
British stuff is doesn't do well here as far as
Yeah, I can imagine.
growing.
I mean, there must be some Native American
Yeah, I'll have to install.
alternative.
I have to call the res and see what we can come up with. Yeah, but then I'd put it on my side, and she'd be like, "No, it's got to be moved over here to." Yeah, she sits out there for hours. We have an outdoor cat that lives. We have an indoor cat too, but the outdoor her Raven, this black cat that just showed up, and they're best buddies. Sit out there and just hang out. Look at play her phone, and they're happy. I wanted to ask you on the well. First off, before we move on to ghosts and that spectral side of your life, continuing on with the Fae, gnomes are definitely in that umbrella of fairies. Here in the U.S., most people think of gnomes. They think of a little guy with a beard and looks kind of like a dwarf, I guess, and has a red pointy hat, and that's what they think of. Maybe yellow, and usually matches their pants or whatever you call those, and they're color coordinated. Usually, I dig that. As you can see, I kind of embrace that a little bit myself. But is that? I mean, are they good? Are they malevolent, or are they a mirror? They react to a person how the person is. What are some of the
Yeah, I think
characteristics of gnomes? We
I
don't.
I I think the ones that you're talking about, that particular subsection, are probably the most relaxed of the fairies, and they are quite happily bimbling around, just getting on with their own stuff. They're not particularly interested in interacting with humans. They're not particularly interested in having any drama. They're very earthy and they're very traditional. So, I mean, the characteristics definitely come from and derive from Germanic and Scandinavian old traditional culture. So they have that very, man and wife marriage and one or two children, and the female gnome is apt at cooking and sewing and singing and all those things, and the male gnome will go out and do the foraging and the gardening, and so they're quite atypical or stereotypical of a traditional um, old family, and in that respect. So they don't really go into the realms of being malevolent, nor do they really go into the malevolence for humans, other than they're particularly attracted to those who like gardening, who are very mindful of nature and natural spaces. So they like people who like animals, and they like people who, will dig in the earth and plant the flowers. They would love your wife. They would definitely love
Hmm,
your wife. There is
absolutely.
a complexity though with this, and it is So I'm part of a fairy investigation society. So we have wide ranging views on different things and origins of different things. Now, the term gnome, you mentioned dwarf, and you are right there to mention dwarf. The word gnome didn't come about until the 16th century with the alchemist Paracelsus. So he wanted to conjure up elements of the earth to help with his alchemy. So he had the 4 elements. So he had sylphs for the air, he had undines for the water, he had salamanders for fire, and he had gnomes for the earth. So they all represented the 4 elements to help create alchemaic work. And he would call these beings into existence, and they would help him do his work. So there is this whole kind of contention of whether gnomes are actually fairies, whether elementals are different to fairies. I mean, where does it? It's quite complex. However, the gnomes that you've described, I believe that they are very much now. If they weren't, they are now very much part of the Fae pantheon, if you like.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it's again, it's so. And I'm sorry, I apologize for. You were talking about in my garden as we speak. I have this. I was walking the dog, and somebody was throwing out a table, an outdoor garden table that had the glass had busted out. And it was a big round thing that held the glass. And I said, "Oh, I can make something out of that. That'll be good for beans to grow on." So I grabbed it and on the way back, and it is now on a big pole in our vegetable garden, and it is painted in Native American culture. We have a thing called the medicine wheel, which is 4 different colors and quadrants, kind of what this alchemy guy was talking about. You know what I mean? Where it that represents that, and it's something to keep in mind. All the different things that are represented, and so we just kind of I just put that up there to be thought it was cool. And it's funny because we have guests that come to parties or whatever, and they're like, "Well, what is that about?" And I'm like, "Well, it's kind of," and they're like, "Oh, the 4 elements," and I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much." You ruined my story, but okay, you know. But yeah, it's so weird how these similar folklore just pop up by chance. You know what I mean? It's very. Before we move into ghosts, though, I gotta mention you have a book, Woolly Snotts, I think is the name of this. I hope I'm probably not pronouncing this. The Curious
You are.
Case of the Wollaton Gnomes. And now I saw that on your Facebook page, and I said, well, what's with the Wollaton Gnomes? Let me to the YouTube, and I watched. Apparently, there is some gnomes in Wallington that have been cited and whatnot. Now, is your book like an analysis of that, or is it just that's the setting of the story, and it's a fiction story? Because I didn't really quite get yet, because
Okay.
I got to order the book, which it is. You can be in the States and get it, folks.
Yes, you can. It's on Amazon, which is brilliant. Which is it's a minor miracle for me, and I'll tell you about the accidental author bit at the end of that. So I was actually writing for this book, which is the Wollaton Gnomes, a Nottinghamshire fairy mystery, which is collated and edited by Dr. Simon Young. It was I mean, there is some outstanding people in there. Lots of people with doctorate, in front of the name.
Right,
So
right.
we've got Dr. Jack Hunter and Dr. Neil Rushton, who are 2 friends of mine. So it was that kind of academic paper. And while I was researching and collating for that academic paper, I kept getting in my mind, nobody's asked the gnomes what happened. Nobody's talked to the gnomes to find out what actually happened. So the Wollaton Gnomes is one of our most underrated, but it's a fairy case within the UK that has probably more evidence than any other fairy case. But because it's gnomes and it's not fairies, as in winged fairies,
Right.
it kind of slid under the radar for people because it sounded ridiculous. And shall I give you the story in a nutshell of what
Sure,
happened
sure.
in real time?
We have plenty of time. We have all the time you have, Kate. So we're on your.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So it was autumn, and this was 1979, so not that far back historically when it comes to this kind of encounter. And a group of children I think they were between the ages of about 7 and 11, so 6, 7, and 11. And we think there were 6 children had broken into or got into a local country park. And when I talk about country park, it's 500 acres of
Mm,
rolling deer land. It's
that's a
got an
big.
Elizabeth. Yes, it's a big space. It's got a massive Elizabeth at the pinnacle of the hill in the park. And literally, as soon as they came into the park, they encountered. Now, this is where it starts. You start going, what? They encountered 60 gnomes, not one or two, 60 in 30 hovering cars. Now, when I first heard this case, I was like, somebody's having a laugh here. So, somebody's joking. There's no way that this is anything. So I started with the book, doing some research, and the more I did research, the more I wasn't getting the answers that I wanted. There were things like the children said that the gnomes were glowing, or that they couldn't speak English, that they talked in laughter language. So all these things were playing around in my head, and it was the title of the book, The Woolly Snotts, that came first. And I did recently have an American say, "Is snots a swear word?" And it's not. It's not a swear word. So you're all good with that one. Um, but the Woolly Snotts comes from Wollaton, shortened down is Woolly, and then Snotts. It's set in Nottingham, and
Mm,
Nottingham used to be called Snottingham, which means earth dweller or cave dweller, because the people in Nottingham used to build their houses underground or in the ground, partly in the ground, because it's sandstone, it's easy to dig out. So that's where the name came from. And the book evolved, and I often joke that I was visited by the gnomes when I was writing this. It took me 7 days. I don't
oh,
think I've ever written that much since I was at university. And it was just literally sat down and blitzed it. It took me 10 days to edit and to get it on the computer, but I hand wrote it. Now, this is the accidental author thing, and this is why I think that the gnomes were involved. And I joke about that, but there is a little inkling of me that thinks, yeah, I think they might have been. So I was on the phone to a agent of a gentleman who I wanted to come on my podcast,
mm-hmm.
and we got on really well with with each other. So we were chatting outside of, the usual business stuff, and he just happened to say, "So what have you been up to this week?" And I said, "Well, I've just completed my first book, so I'm now trying to research how to get it self-published or how to put it out to publishers, because I had no clue."
Right.
And he said, "I've got a publishing house. Would you like me to have a look at it?" And I was like, this was just a freak chance thing.
One of those
And
deals.
it's what, honestly, it just couldn't have happened. So it was so smooth. Unfortunately, my first publishers are now semi-retired, so that was then passed over to good friends of mine. I write for Haunted magazine, so they have a publishing house called Dead Good Publishing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was handed over to them to republish. So that's the book there.
Wow. Look at that.
That's the front cover. I absolutely adore what they did with the front cover. I was really very, very happy with that. So basically, it's the story of the gnomes and the encounter with the children from their perspective, but it's also about their history, their society, their culture, their being. It's about gnomes in general,
Interesting.
and I have been told it's quite humorous, which is nice.
Nice. That makes it an easier read. You know what I mean? That's fascinating. And folks, like I said, no matter where you are on the planet, you can get this book. It's we have a link right down in the description of this and whatnot. So get to ordering it. I think she's selling it too cheap, personally, but that's just me. That's just me. People
Thank
pay
you.
double that, but yeah, £11. I don't know what that is in U.S. dollars, but it can't be that much.
$2. I'm going to lie to you and tell you it's about $2, so everybody goes out and buys it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You can pay for it with returnable bottle. No, I'm kidding. Well, you could technically. You just got to return them, get the money, and then anyway, fascinating, fascinating. Well, I'd never heard of it. That's pretty cool. The thing that I get what you're saying about people going, wow, it's gnomes. They're gonna dismiss that pretty quickly. What's weird to me is I like him. I'm sure anybody watching this has watched creepy YouTube videos or something. You know what I mean? Oh, you have a party, people over, a dinner party or something, put that on afterwards, and everybody, oh, that could, oh, that's pretty crazy. Nobody has a problem. They can totally wrap their head around, well, this Japanese woman specter haunts this stretch of road or so, oh, totally could happen. Absolutely could happen. Or this person is possessed and had to have a priest come and exorcise. Oh, completely reasonable. Yes. Oh, they're crawling the wall. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I totally get. But you're right. You bring up gnomes in a flying car, and people are suddenly, or UFO. You know what I mean? They're like, people
Mm.
accept that all the time, and so much, in fact, here in the States, the weird thing is they've had all these government, I don't know what you call meetings or whatever, investigations. And the government and everybody's like pilots, are flying these $5 billion jets and stuff. You don't just put some wackadoo piloting that and, in charge of that much money of equipment.
Mm.
They usually have a pretty good beat on things. And they're like, yeah, we saw this. Here's the photographs. Here's the video. And everybody's like, yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Hmm.
Anyway, and I'm like, so what's the difference between that and a gnome? Something you don't know. That absolutely could have happened. I'm not saying I'm a big believer in any of that. I'm just saying the pots the zany world we live in, absolutely things like that can happen. It's very true.
I mean,
Uh,
we've been doing further research. There's a group of us who we meet twice a year. We actually go to Wollaton Park and we'll do field research, and we'll also come back and sort of collate evidence or collate other questions that we have. And so we've been expanding it out again on an academic level. One of the interesting things was the evidence that was gained after the kids jumping in or getting into the park was that happened on a Sunday. On the Tuesday, their headmaster of their school took them all to one side and recorded the incident from each of them.
really?
They were then they were subsequently interviewed by different newspapers, different radios. There was also a lady from the Fairy Investigation Society back in the 1970s who asked them the questions, and they always kept to the story. None of them ever broke, none of them ever changed their story. And I got to speak a couple of years ago to that headmaster, and it was a very brief conversation. But one thing that came out of that conversation was I said to him, do you believe the children? Did you believe the children? And his response was, I had no reason not to believe them. They didn't have really the imagination to be able to make it up. He knew his children in his school very, very well, and they were very
Right.
deprived. So they didn't have access to books like Peter Pan or whatever. They didn't have, access to probably television at that time, or very minimal access to television. And the fact that he believed them, and he'd gone through the education system, he'd been a head teacher, he then went up to work higher to overbranching education within the county. So he wasn't a man who um, would fib, would fabricate what he said, and I found that absolutely astounding that he said that he'd believed them.
And they didn't have a big test or something. So we couldn't make the test, headmaster. We. some gnomes tripped us up, you know what I mean? And so we had to smoke cigarettes and hang out with them, and it wasn't one of those deals.
No, no,
You know,
it was fact that,
why
and
would they make it
one
up?
of the
Why would they make it up and risk ridicule
eh,
like you experienced? And you know, yeah, who's going to sign up for that? You know what I mean?
I mean, one of the other real mysteries out of this mystery is for many, many years, probably from the mid 1980s, 1990s, various different people writing about the subject have tried to find the children because they'd all be still alive. They would be in their probably 50s or 60s now, and not one of them has ever come forward. Not one of them is traceable. So people have been through all kinds of records. They've just vanished. They've just literally disappeared. Disappeared.
They're probably in a flying car somewhere, living their best life with the gnomes. No,
I
joking.
hope so.
I hope
I
so.
hope so.
Amazing, amazing. Well, like I said, it's a weird world, folks. It's a weird world, and you know, and I don't mean weird in a negative connotation. I'm saying it's weird. There's lots of stuff happens every day. Happens every day. I'm amazed, at some of the stuff I see. It's crazy. Now we're gonna move. Let's move the conversation. Let's slide the needle over to things that go bump in the night. Let me ask you at the onset of this, because you're an expert in this stuff, and now we're friends on Facebook. So when I have these thoughts at 3 in the morning, I will be sending you a message. She's like, "Great, that's great, Jamie. It's fantastic." Uh, no, but I have heard two schools of thought, and let me say at the onset, forgive my ignorance if I get something wrong. It's not intentional, and it's just um, I don't know everything about everything. That being said, I've heard two schools of thought when it comes to ghosts. That one is they're conscious, they can make a decision. They're like, hey, I'm going to go scare the bejesus out of this guy or gal or whatever. Two, it's like a film loop, an impression of something that happened that just keeps happening at a particular place, perhaps time. Where do you fall in, or are they both? That could be either of those things happening.
Yeah, that definitely either. So the second one that you're talking about, where it's almost like imprinted into the dimensions, that is known as the stone tape theory. So it's almost like the landscape or the house or the building or whatever absorbs a particular person or a particular set of events that occur. Because sometimes people have that where they've actually seen buildings appear and disappear. So there's a certain time of year where a building would just appear, or ghost ships or aeroplanes. That's another one. So that theory is that it's just an impregnation within the dimensions of a thing or a person.
Interesting.
There are spirits that are conscious and can interact with humans. There is also a third theory, and this is one that I really enjoy this theory, that as human beings that we have two aspects to us. We have a soul and a spirit. And on point of death, we have one that will just go wherever it wants to go, whatever your religion is or whatever your theories are about it, off it flits, whether it's into the universe or to God or wherever it wants to go. There's another part of you that has to go through a journey of almost like a karmic resolution.
Mm,
So that could be you run through your life and you look of what you've done, and if you're kind of like, yep, I'm good with that, I'm okay, and boof, that you're just gone. You're absolutely just gone. However, there are people on point of death who are either petrified for something that they've done in their life, or they've had a point of death that's been traumatic and they find it very, very difficult to process that, so they can't move on. One of the theories is why, I mean, the question I do get quite a bit is, why is there so many Victorian, Edwardian ghosts? Why do we not see ghosts really prior to that? I mean, I've had that question of why are there no ghost dinosaurs?
mm,
And I think it's that point of death experience. So when we were at the height of sort of Christian moral values,
Oh yeah,
especially in the
Victorian
West.
era was zany, you know.
Yeah, don't show your ankle because you'll offend God, that kind of thing, you know. How dare you show your ankle, you're a harlot. So there was a lot more to process, and there was a lot more things that would make you feel as though you had been a bad person in life. So there is a lot more of those spirits or souls trapped that cannot sort of move on because they haven't processed all their karmic baggage, if you like, within life. And I was thinking about it today, I've had some amazing experiences where I've been in a situation communicating with a spirit, and you say, do you understand that you're dead? And the moment you say that, you can almost hear them go, they hadn't processed
Right.
that they weren't amongst the living anymore. And that's all they needed to go, oh yeah, that explains a lot, that explains so much, and off they pop.
It's
There are
Nicole
many, many
Kidman and the
theories.
others, at the end of I don't
Yeah,
want to ruin that for anybody, but it's a good twist, is all I'm saying. It's a good twist.
yes,
Didn't
it's a
see
good
it coming.
movie. It is a good movie.
Yeah, that has logic to it. It cause and effect. If you haven't handled your scandal, maybe you need to get on that. Just saying.
And I think
Just saying.
I think it's us that judge that. I don't think it's a higher thing that judges that. I think we judge. Have we done everything we can in life to make ourselves proud at that particular point?
Right. Because we all sleep. We all we all toss and turn. We all know what we know that nobody else does. And you gotta, if something's holding you up, I think, yeah, figure that out. Figure that out.
Yeah, get.
Otherwise, you're
I
going to
think.
spend a long time figuring it out. And,
Yeah,
you might spend it in my house, which is the most boring place for a ghost ever. I told that story to some friends and they're like, oh man, I'm just thinking about what being a ghost in your. It's like, really, Jamie? We're watching a bushcraft video again? Come on, man. Come on. Get some new magazines. These have been on the coffee table for 5 years. We're sick of them. Get some new ones. Quit being cheap. No, it's very true. It's very true. Our house is terribly boring. What can I say? Ghosts. Ghosts. That's another thing that pops up in every culture. I can't think of a
yeah.
culture that says, oh, no, that's blah, blah, blah. Outside of, um, maybe I'm thinking super religious people that I have known in the Christian. Oh well, no, it's a demon. Well, you have no problem wrapping your head around a demon. What's to say by your logic? Uh, it's crazy. Do you ever? Now that you said this was kind of a fear of yours when you started out, has that fear waned a little bit, perhaps, as you got to understand that particular world a little better?
Definitely. I think I have a healthy amount of fear now. I don't have. Um, I mean, I couldn't even watch the really tacky paranormal shows before I started in the field. I'd always had an interest, always had an interest in the supernatural, but anything ghosts, I would bracket it off, push to one side, and no, 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 don't want to touch it. Um, I do think that comes from the fact I think I was very sensitive as a child, and I think I learnt very quickly how to shut off any kind of interaction. And I think that fear grew because I was very much aware that there was other things going on in the ether, and that we are limited. We are literally, meat suits that are limited. Our visuals are limited, our hearings limited, our smells limited, our taste limited, our touch is limited. We are limited. in our capacity to be able to move through this world. I mean, you can look at the plethora of animals who have, we've got things like the hammerhead shark who sweep with radar. They have inbuilt biological radar, and they see the world through beeps that come back to them. Same as bats, they have radar. It's just phenomenal.
Absolutely.
But we do believe that we have the capacity to say, no, these things don't exist, because we haven't got the capacity to receive them within the bodies that we're in. I think there's also a mindset as well. I think there's also a mindset of, you open up a little bit and it kind of all comes flooding. You kind of go, okay, I'm willing to start understanding this. I've had a lot of people talk to me about their experiences where they have been maybe writing about the paranormal from a perspective of academia, and because they've been in that mindset, I've actually said to them,
Awareness is, yeah.
yes, have you experienced stuff while you've been doing this? And they're like, I really shouldn't talk about this. They're very closed off. But yes, I've had a couple of occasions where things have happened, and it's only while I've been writing this, because it's mindset and intention that's there and in that. So yeah, like you say, it's a weird old world.
It really is. I don't know if you guys have this automobile game in the UK that we have in the States. We call it punch buggy or slug bug here. You'll be on a long car ride trip usually when you're a kid, and you look for the Volkswagen Beetle car, the round car. And there's one yellow, and you kind of punch your brother or whatever in the shoulder, not hard, but you know, punch buggy yellow over there, whatever. And it's weird when you play that. It's just a childhood game. Suddenly, you start seeing a lot of Volkswagen Beetles around. It was so much more than
Yeah.
you ever did before, and it's really just because you're looking for them. It's so true. In business, I always tell kids I mentor or younger people I mentor and stuff. I'm like, in business, beware, understand that once in a lifetime deals happen about twice a month if your awareness
Mm.
is open. They're all over the place. So be a little more discerning when you're looking at a particular thing. It ain't that once in a lifetime much. But I'm not saying it always isn't. But anyway, yeah, when your awareness is open, and everybody's got a story. Everybody's grandma has a story. Everybody,
Yeah.
these aren't, you know, I know and I know a lot of people. Everybody's got a ghost story somewhere in their family. Not everybody has a UFO story. Is all I'm saying. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Uh, I do know two people that claim to have seen the Loch Ness monster, but foot.
Wow.
But that's definitely the rarity. Everybody's got it's a ghost story. Yeah,
Mm.
great. And it always has been. It's in our Christmas carols. It's in literature. It's from Shakespeare to Dickens to wherever. It's everywhere there. And yeah, so I have some Japanese friends that are, oh my god, every other story is a ghost story. And
Oh,
they're
the Japanese.
weird. They're
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah, they
not
love their
fun.
ghost stories. The Japanese, yeah,
Yeah.
they are very, very, very strange. There is an incredibly well-known, notorious Japanese forest
Oh
that's
yeah.
meant to unfortunately have a huge suicide rate within the forest. And because of that, it's got so many legends about ghosts and wailing women, and just
Yeah, all kinds of
ghosts turning up en masse. It's on steroids. It's ghost stories on steroids, isn't it?
Susie and the Banshee concert. My advice to anybody out there: if a ghost is whispering to you to do yourself in, don't. Get a second
Oh,
opinion, and preferably the hell out of that forest in Japan. All I'm saying. All I'm saying.
an opinion, preferably from a gnome who will tell
Yes,
you definitely don't do it.
he'll tell you to start a garden. He'll tell you to start a
Yes.
garden. Calm you down. Everything will work out. Sit out there. It's great. I like gnomes. That's all I'm saying. The more I learn about them, I'm like, Yeah, sign me up, man. That sounds pretty good to
Yeah.
me. Now, in addition to your book that you have at Amazon, are you also mentioned briefly there? You also have a podcast. Do we need to? I was not aware of this. We will put a link to that as well, folks, down in the description. And what is that ongoing and whatnot? And it's about this kind of
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
because
Yeah,
people love this kind of stuff.
it's predominantly fairy based, but
Okay.
we do go into the paranormal. So it's myself and Dr. Neil Rushton, who's my co-host. And I started it off particularly because I was in the paranormal community. I was being asked lots of questions about fairies that I didn't feel particularly qualified to ask. And we're year 4 of doing the podcast now, which is amazing. So I started asking people to come on the podcast to explain from their perspective what they thought fairies are and how they interacted with them and that kind of thing. And it snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And I had a Turner Art Prize winner, a fine artist, who came and told me
Wow.
his story about how the gnomes had got him into being an artist. And that was one of my absolute highlights. It was a chap called Mark Leckie, who I think he won it in 2017 or something like that, to Turner Art
Oh,
Prize. So I've had a plethora of people on. We've had Son, and we've had a band on who play fairy music. We've had
how cool is
people who
that?
are, huh?
How cool is that?
I
That's
know, I know.
different. Wow. I
They
love it.
they
I
were
love it.
they were brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. We've had people with doctorates in all kinds of things come on and talk about it, from perspectives of psychedelic drugs, and we've had perspectives from, the whole, where does it fit in the whole range of the supernatural. So we've had academics come on and talk about it. It's just been brilliant, and
Well,
I'm very blessed because
that's a whole nother thing. Now, this particular one that I started hearing about, as far as psychedelic drugs and whatnot, came. I'm a retired club rat, folks. My younger wild wolfing around days are way behind me. I have one cocktail now, and I'm laying on the floor singing songs. It's I am not the cool guy I once was. So I don't never experienced this personally, but there's if you YouTube it, there's a whole bunch of videos about it where people take this particular DMT drug or whatnot, and they go into another perception, another world, and there's they call them elves, I think. They're
Mhm,
these almost digital creatures that live there and have interacted with them. I'm like,
mhm.
wow, that is way different than anything I ever did in a field. Amazing.
Yeah, I I got to talk to one of the guests that we have on the podcast is Dr. David Luke, who is the world's leading expert in DMT and DMT experiences. And he's been going around the globe collating people's experiences whilst on DMT and looking at the similarities. And he was saying that
Yeah, because there
people
are
even, yeah,
the
massive
same people, the
similarities.
same creatures show up or whatnot.
Yes, yeah. So he was saying that he'd been I think he'd been with a tribe in the Amazon, and they were induced DMT through ayahuasca, so through an ayahuasca ritual, and they were describing the same entities as some guys he had bumped into in London who were doing it recreationally. They had had the same interaction with
That's
these
weird.
same beings. It's
That's
it's
weird.
incredibly weird.
Well, the thing with that is it leads to the thought, then stream of consciousness I guess I'm having on that is, okay, so if there are beings on another plane of existence that is accessible through this particular narcotic, I've always made the joke about demons, and everybody's like, yeah, that's
Hmm.
brilliant, Jamie, joke about demons, that's great. No, I get it, but I've always made the joke of, I feel bad for demons because I would be pretty annoyed if I found out that my entire existence, my entire universe, was to mess with the people on this particular little planet, and that's it. That's that's it. I'm like, man, I feel
Yeah,
bad for it. That would suck to find you're just that part of the cog. But and that's always been a joke, whether it's good or not, doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, okay, so if there is another dimension that people have accessed through this, well, who's to say there isn't a dimension of hell or demons or what have you then? Because if we've opened up the possibility of other realms of existence and whatnot, then people say, oh, well, parallel worlds in the multiverse. Well, where does that end? You know what I mean?
Mm,
And in an
mm.
infinite
It,
number of universes, there's got to be one
yeah,
where there isn't parallel universe. You know what I mean? Because just by the nature of it, it's
yeah.
crazy. It's crazy. I know we've went long. I know we've went long, but I have to ask you because you had an experience. I don't know if this was your first or not. Every weird guy that starts a podcast, and probably some weird girl, I don't know. I think girls are probably a little more on the ball than this, have listened to Coast, and that is their ultimate dream job. Some of us may have a side fantasy of being an NPR interviewer, but those are the real nerds. But Coast to Coast, you just did the show. How cool is
I
that?
know. Oh, let me tell you, I kind of fell into some. It was a in between person who said, "Would you like to go on the show?" And I very rarely look up people's podcasts or radios, or I've been on TV as well. I very rarely do any kind of research, just because I like to go in fresh. I
Mm-hmm.
like to receive people as they come across. I don't like to have a preconceived idea about how somebody is. So I said, I'll do coast to coast, thinking it was some backwater radio station.
Oh no,
And then I
no.
googled it, and I about fell through the floor.
Oh yeah, that's like the Duran
Honestly,
Duran of shows. I mean, it's big time, big time.
big time. I know. I was terrified, and I literally researched around my subject, outside my subject for 3 days solid. I was writing notes. I was writing notes on notes. I made sure, and it was so relaxed. I expected to be grilled, to be really grilled on things. I mean, George Norris just so laid back anyway, isn't he? He's
Absolutely,
horizontal.
and yeah, and that's kind of where I get a little bit of my attitude from mine is I try to emulate a little bit in the fact that I never judge people.
Yes.
It's never, I had a guest, a paranormal guest, a few months back that was talking extra dimensions, and there were 14 races of aliens and blah blah blah, and there's a new awakening, all this stuff. No, I'm not putting her down by any means. Even now I'm not, because again, I'm an old man. I don't know everything about everything. Absolutely. I'll give you a good example of this, folks. About 15 years ago, I had some medical stuff that had happened. I got a hernia. I didn't get it taken care of. I thought it would cure itself. It did not. Wound up in the hospital for 3 months, and 16 surgeries later, where they were putting stuff. Yeah, it was a bad scene. After one of these particular surgeries, I woke up in the ICU, and I felt like Neo from the Matrix. I had this thing down my throat. I was trying to pull it out. They put these mitts on my hands so I couldn't do that to prevent me doing that. But I have never believed uh, in hell. Never entered my mind that, yeah, this is an actual, that could happen until that experience. And finally, they got the mitts off, and they gave me a pad of paper and a pencil because I was gesturing for one. And that was the first question I asked the nurse in the ICU there. Couldn't speak, had that thing in my mouth. Have I been wrong? Is this hell? Is
Wow.
And I, in my heart of hearts, because I was in so much pain, and then it was
Mm,
such a weird circumstance to be in that I had never experienced. I was concerned that
mm,
my grandfather used to say, no one dies an atheist in a foxhole. And yeah, I became very aware that I could have been wrong about things.
mm.
And that attitude is I've had that attitude since then. No, I'm not saying I'm gullible. I'm sending money to faith healers or anything like that. I'm saying the world is weird, and I've been so sure about so many things that turned out I was wrong about. You know, you just never know. You never know. My thought and my advice is to become friends with people like Kate and take notes. You might learn something, maybe have a little bit better beat on things. If course corrections needed, listen to. We have a beehive in our garden, and I live in South Florida. We're prone to hurricanes every year. I watch that beehive. If the bees all go in the beehive and hunker down, I'm like, ooh, I better go get hunkered down too.
Yeah.
You know,
Bees are absolutely fascinating creatures. They have only just discovered and I don't know why it's science has just discovered that the frequency of vibration from a bee is our healing frequency.
see,
So the longer you spend with bees, the more they will help to heal you. And I don't know whether
absolutely.
you have it in America, but we have a saying, I think it's along the lines of tell it to the bees. So if you are grief stricken, you would go to a beehive and you would talk to the bees about your grief. So if you'd lost somebody, you would tell the bees. And I do believe that that comes from the fact that people knew that the bee vibration helped heal people. It's like,
That's a
and we're
Cherokee
just
thing too.
discovering this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very true. Hey, if you have a sore throat, take a spoonful of honey.
definitely.
Helps. you know, honey doesn't
Yeah,
go bad either. It's weird. Yeah, it's a weird world, man. And you just have your awareness open. An open mind is like a parachute. It works so much better when it's open. You can. You never know. You never know. Be kind. Try to be good. And I
yeah,
have found, and I'm going to sound really witchy in California and all this and that. I have found in my life, whatever my wife says this in a much more elegant way, and I'm sure Kate would too, and their witchiness. Whatever you put out into the universe tends to come back to you. So if you're a creep, guess what? But if you're kind and nice, and that kind of stuff comes, and
I can. I totally agree with you, but I do hear a raft of people going, but I'm kind and I'm nice and bad things happen. But I want to put a caveat on that. And I always say that in this life, there are two things. There are lessons and there are blessings. So there's nothing bad that happens to you. It's simply a lesson, and blessings will follow that lesson. So no matter how
absolutely,
hard you think you are going through, you are literally going through something that's teaching you a different way or a different notion or a different way of being.
absolutely. I have some friends, some young friends that are the boyfriend of a gal I mentor for art stuff, and she was telling me the story where they signed with some record label in, I don't know, somewhere in Eastern Europe, and they didn't physically go to Eastern Europe. They just sent a Western Union some money, and turns out, and I'm like, well, how much? She's like, $1,100. I'm like, the lesson is be glad he didn't send $1,200. That's an expensive course to learn about sending money to
Yeah,
people you don't know, but now he knows. He'll never
yeah,
forget that. you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and it's
bless.
it's hard to see sometimes, especially when terrible things happen, especially with health and things of that nature.
Mm,
But usually there's if you get through whatever you're going through, folks, and you can look back at it after a little time has passed, you can usually look back and go, well, this wouldn't have happened if that wouldn't have happened. And it's
yes.
it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing.
I mean, it's also the smallest things as well that occur. It's like, something horrific happens not long after you meet somebody you connect with. It's not even connected to the bad thing that's happened. And then you look back, 10 years down the line and think, that's exactly why I met that person at that time. That's exactly what I needed. you know, at that
Absolutely.
particular time in my life. And
Absolutely.
it's because we're getting old. It's because we're getting old that we have this hindsight. That's what it is.
Well, yeah, and yeah, no, yeah, I would have went back to when I was 25 and yeah, are you kidding me? No, I, and I'm telling you, Kate, I lived a fast life. I lived a pretty fast life for a long time. And I'll tell you that the most painful thing was that medical thing that happened to me. Met my wife 6 months after that. And
There you go.
I slowed the heck down. It wasn't just
Mm,
getting blackout drunk and partying and hanging out in nightclubs. I said, okay, that was a chapter, and that's great. And all the
mhm.
people that I knew in that chapter are still amazing. They're like, how is that guy even still around? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's crazy. But yeah, things tend to get sorted out the way they're supposed to be.
they do.
If your awareness is on, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you you start focusing on what's important. I started painting a lot more. I was very aware of the first time in my life of my mortality, and I'm here for a limited time. I've got a lot of paintings to get out, before I'm on to the next thing. And it's crazy. It's crazy. So, folks,
Mm,
once again, Woolly Snotts, you got to get it. You got to get this book anyway, just to put on your coffee table, so people that come over and visit you know that you're interesting. I mean, come on, come on. At the very least, read the thing, and you might learn something. I'm gonna get my copy. I'm telling you, and it sounds just by talking to Kate that it's a cool book, man. I had these people. Where's it at? It's over here in the bookshelf somewhere. Oh man, this is a mistake. Things are gonna fall. I had some people on my show. I don't know, a couple years ago, and they sent me. I got their book. It's UFO sightings desk reference in the United States, 2001 to 2020. Great book. Everybody should buy it.
wow.
This is the most because it's just charts and real, real page, 1,000-page book of encounters. It ain't a page turner, is what I'm saying. The Woolly Snot sounds to me like a page turner. This thing's put people to sleep.
It's definitely not heavy academic reading, the Woolly Snotts. I call it a fireside book. It's a book as an adult that you can read. If you want to read it to your kids, then it's definitely got things in there for adults, and it's definitely got themes for kids. But I didn't write it for kids, although it's marketed for children. I wrote it for me. I
Because
wrote
it's
it because I
gnomes.
needed to get the story out. Yeah, and the gnomes. I wrote it for the gnomes.
Absolutely. I like gnomes. That was my favorite movie as a kid. I'm an old man. And there was a movie that Disney put out. They didn't have wings, called the Gnome Mobile, and they lived in the redwood forest. I could have
Ah,
watched that movie over and over. Everybody's like, "What are you talking about?" Yes, Disney made movies back in the day. It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyhow, Kate, you're one of the most fascinating people I have met. You are just
thank
all
you.
turned up to 10. You know, it, keep doing what you're doing. If you ever wake up one morning and go, I don't know if I can do it today, well, you should because you're super interesting, Um, and it sounds like you're having a fun time and whatnot. Folks, we also will have links to Kate's Facebook pages and Instagram and all of that down below. And one of the cool things about Kate's pages is, man, she's doing all this stuff and, you know, she posts about it. You can keep up with her. I look forward to looking at your social media pages daily because it's just, there's always something happening, you know? Let's go ghost
Life's
hunt a
great.
haunted
Life's
prison. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
I've got two haunted prisons this year that we're doing. We're doing Shrewsbury, which I've done once before many years ago, and we're doing Shepton Mallet. And Shepton Mallet's one of my least favourite locations. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
that would be the worst place to be a ghost at, to be stuck. Oh, you're in prison, and guess what? You ain't getting out.
You stay in there.
Oh my gosh, you know? Yeah, you never have a haunted cruise ship, or I would go to Vegas, haunt a casino or something, you know? No,
There's
I say
lots
I
of
would do
ghosts of
that if I had a choice in the matter. Sounds to me like a lot of these ghosts probably don't have a, well, where would you like to haunt? We have this available, that available. Here's our premier package. They kind of have
I
the
love
haunt.
that idea. I love that idea. I mean, Vegas is meant to be incredibly haunted, and cruise ships, bizarrely enough, because cruises are predominantly an older person's luxury, if you like, there are deaths, unfortunately, that occur on cruise ships. So,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, don't discount. I don't think there's anywhere on the planet that I can't think of anywhere that's devoid of hauntings.
I saw
Shops
some
have got
movie
hauntings.
years ago, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but there was a thing in it. Somebody was talking to somebody who was set in Vegas, and they found that this guy they were talking to actually was some sort of Norse god of mischief that had shown up and whatnot. And
Wow.
they said, "Why are you here in Las Vegas of all places? Why aren't you in Norway or wherever?" And he said, "Because I was drawn here. There's more rituals that happen in Las Vegas than anywhere else on the planet." And I happened to be going to Las Vegas the following weekend after I'd seen that movie. And as I'm walking through the casino, because you got to walk through all the games to get to check in, the particular casino I was at, a hotel. And as I'm walking, I'm seeing everybody playing slot machines. And
Hmm.
everybody has their lucky pair of socks on, they hit the button the certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, those are all rituals. Everybody's
Yes.
doing their little magic, whether they call
Yeah.
it that or not, they're all doing it. And
Hmm.
you and no, I'm not saying that movie was foretelling or anything like that. Because I got it because obviously whoever
Hmm.
wrote the movie had walked through a casino in Vegas and saw the same thing. But yeah, there's a lot of that going on in there. But yeah, and it was always weird to me too that you always see like ghost stories that happen in graveyards. I'm like, why would a ghost hang out in the graveyard?
Exactly.
I mean, nothing.
Exactly.
By the time someone's in a graveyard, if something traumatic has happened to them, I'm assuming somewhere else.
I mean, there is one kind of tentative explanation where it's said that all the dead will remain 3 days on the planet. They're kind of in that limbo. And in that time, that's where the old saying is to open up all your doors and windows when somebody's died to be able to let them out the property.
Gotcha.
So one of the theories is that the dead will actually turn up to their own funeral out of curiosity to see who turns up in the reaction. And maybe it is that when they turn up, that's it. Their time transpires and they kind of get stuck in that cemetery. But to me, I'm with you. Cemeteries are very peaceful, very
Yeah,
spiritually quiet.
absolutely. At least the ones I've ever been to are. Yeah, you didn't have a bunch of gunshots in the distance or anything. You know what I mean? They're usually a pretty chill place.
Yeah.
But who knows? Who knows? Again, I could be wrong on things. Absolutely. Maybe in the spectral afterlife, they are the hot spot to be. That's the cool club to be at. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll probably be laughing about this sometime, trying to get into a cemetery club. I was wrong. Anyhow, thank you so much, Kate. It's so cool. And here's another lesson I just want to say before we end things. How Kate and I met was fascinating. We met on social media, and she had made her post about being on Coast to Coast. And I said, well, this is a Coast to Coast lady. She ain't even going to respond to my DM here. And, I just sent her one saying, hey, we have a little podcast. If you want to be on it, we'd love to have you. Yeah, so if you want to meet somebody on social media, message them. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, I have been absolutely shocked with my podcast, even from the early days when I had 50 people subscribing. It's not a massive podcast. I would ask people who I wouldn't even dare approach on social media if I didn't have my podcast. And I've not had anybody say no. And it blows me away every time. So people who I hero worship, and I've thought, oh, I'm going to try them and see if they'll come on. And they've said yes. And then I spend days panicking, thinking, what am I going to talk to them about? You know, I've got to really impress this person. But they've all been lovely. They've all been
Yeah,
superhuman beings. They've been lovely.
absolutely. And it's and folks out there, that are doing. I say start your podcast. Absolutely do it. I've had one since 2013. We just started doing video last summer. It's
Hmm.
been audio the whole time, and it's a lot of work, and it's very because you're right. You'll go through a period where you don't have that many listeners or what have you, and it's you got to trudge through it. Then all of a sudden you enter the realm of advertisers and all kinds of fun business stuff that
Well, no,
is not fun at all, but
no.
it's crazy talking to agents and PR people and all of. I remember as a painter, I did my first album cover. Boy, did I think I was cool. I was like walking around for a week, chest puffed out. And now I talk to record companies a few times a week. It's a Tuesday.
Yeah,
It ain't a big deal. But yeah, it's the podcast. And it's amazing the technology. Yeah, we all complain about technology. And I agree, social media can be crazy sometimes. But then again, Kate's in the UK right now. I'm in South Florida, and we're just sitting here in
I
real
know.
time. And a couple of years ago, this would have if this happened, there would be a giant phone bill or something involved in this.
I know.
Now it's like,
I know.
anyway. Thank you, Kate. You're the best. Is there anything else we
Bless
need
you.
to check out in Kate here in the Hawthorns world?
Just anything that comes up on my social media. I post quite regularly about things I'm doing, things that I've previously done. There's some filming projects coming out this year that took place last year. So
Nice.
just keep an eye out for them. That'll be good.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'm sure we'll have you back, Kate. I'm sure we'll have you back.
I'd
Uh,
love to come back. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this side too. Very, very cool. Folks, so that's going to wrap it up for us on this episode. Keep being kind out there and keep the faith, man. It's a weird, crazy world. I get it. Be patient with people, and they'll be patient with you. So it kind of works out that way. But be good. That's my advice to everybody. Anyway, we'll see you next time. Bye.
This has been pop art painter Jamie Roxx's Pop Rocks Radio Talk Show. It has been executive produced by Jamie Roxx, recorded at his studio in Deerfield Beach in South Florida. All rights reserved by Pop Rocks Limited. Hannah Oli, Pop Rocks Radio. Estás escuchando Jamie Roxx de Pop Rocks Radio. Manténganse al tanto.
Hej, det här är Hicks från Sverige och ni lyssnar till Pop Rocks Radio med Jamie Roxx.